Corrupt sheriff humiliated a diner waitress. He didn't know a Navy SEAL was watching. The bell above the diner door barely finished ringing when the first slap of humiliation hit the room, sharp, loud, and impossible to ignore. Every fork froze midair, every whisper died, and in that heavy silence, a young waitress stood trembling while a powerful man in uniform raised his voice like he owned not just the place, but everyone inside it. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and standing up for what's right, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be heard. Her name was Emily Carter, a 24-year-old waitress who carried more weight in her heart than on the tray in her hands. Life hadn't been kind to her. Her father had passed away years ago, leaving behind debts and memories that hurt more than comforted. Her mother, fragile and often ill, depended entirely on Emily's long shifts at the small roadside diner just outside town. Every tip mattered. Every smile she forced through exhaustion was for survival, not happiness. The diner itself was simple: warm lights, red booths, the faint smell of coffee that never really left. It was the kind of place where regulars came to escape their own troubles, even if just for a meal. But that day, peace shattered the moment Sheriff Dalton Reed walked in. He wasn't just any sheriff. He was the law in that town, and everyone knew it. People avoided eye contact when he entered, conversations softened, and even the owner of the diner stood a little straighter. Dalton carried power like a weapon, and he wasn't afraid to use it. Emily had served him before. She knew his temper, his unpredictable nature, and the way he enjoyed making people feel small. Still, she approached him with the same gentle politeness she offered every customer, because she had no choice. Her hands were steady at first as she poured his coffee, but the moment she accidentally spilled a few drops near the edge of his table, everything changed. The sheriff's chair scraped loudly as he stood, his face tightening with anger that felt far too big for such a small mistake. His voice cut through the diner, accusing, harsh, and filled with authority that didn't allow room for apology. Emily tried to explain, her voice soft, her words careful, but it didn't matter. The humiliation wasn't just in his words, it was in how loudly he spoke them, how he made sure everyone heard, how he turned a simple accident into a public display of control. Emily felt her cheeks burn. Her hands trembled now, not from clumsiness, but from the weight of being watched. She lowered her gaze, trying to shrink herself out of the moment, but there was nowhere to hide. And then quietly, unnoticed at first, someone else was watching too. In the far corner of the diner sat a man who hadn't said a word since he walked in. He wore a plain shirt, his posture calm, his expression unreadable. To anyone else, he looked like just another traveler passing through. But there was something different about him, a stillness, a quiet awareness. His name was Daniel Hayes, a former Navy SEAL who had seen more chaos than most could imagine. He had faced danger, survived battles, and carried scars that didn't always show. But what stood out most about him wasn't his strength, it was his sense of justice. Daniel had come to the diner for a simple meal. He didn't expect to witness something that stirred something deeper inside him. As the sheriff continued, Emily's silence grew heavier. She didn't argue, she didn't defend herself. She just stood there, absorbing every word like it was something she had learned to endure. Because in her world, standing up often meant losing everything, but Daniel had lived a different life. He had learned that silence in the face of wrong wasn't peace, it was permission. Still, he didn't move immediately. He watched, he listened. He studied the room, the reactions, the fear in the eyes of the people who said nothing. He understood something important in that moment. This wasn't just about one waitress. This was about a pattern, a system, a man who believed he could act without consequence. And Daniel knew one thing for sure, men like that only stop when someone finally stands. Emily tried to clean the spill, her movements careful, her breathing uneven. The sheriff's voice lowered slightly, but his words didn't soften. They lingered, cutting deeper because they were no longer loud, they were deliberate. She whispered an apology, but it wasn't enough for him. It never was. That's when Daniel slowly stood up. There was no dramatic movement, no sudden action, just a quiet shift that somehow changed the entire atmosphere of the diner. He walked forward with calm steps, his eyes steady, his presence impossible to ignore once noticed. The sheriff turned, annoyed at the interruption, ready to assert his authority once again. But something in Daniel's gaze made him pause just for a second. It was subtle, but it mattered. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words were firm, controlled, and carried the weight of someone who had nothing to prove but everything to protect. He spoke not with anger, but with clarity, the kind that exposes truth without needing to shout. The room held its breath. Emily looked up, confusion mixing with a fragile sense of hope she didn't dare trust yet. The sheriff laughed at first, brushing it off like an inconvenience, but Daniel didn't back down. He stood his ground, calmly pointing out the obvious, that power doesn't give someone